Hello and welcome back to part two of Uranus-Pluto conjunction. Last time did not show the whole screen to illustrate the date, October 9th, 1965, 9:11 p.m. in Greenwich. That little 911 shows up a lot, doesn't it? I always see it as the emergency number, and sure enough, it's the number you dial if there's an emergency. The whole focus has been to illustrate that when you have a conjunction of any two planets, it produces a seed event. And from the standpoint of looking at planets and aspects and so forth in astrology, we want to get to a base point. When did something start? So always the answer is when there was a conjunction. We can talk about planets entering new signs, and that's true, but especially planets conjuncting one another is really the core. Because in astrology, the planets are the actors, so they're the main players, really. So we look at Uranus, Pluto, and there's always many conjunctions occurring, the sun and moon every 29 and a half days, and Mercury, Venus, and Mars are quicker, in their cycles that are frequent, etc. But, we can jump to the bigger cycles like Jupiter, Saturn every 20 years, then Uranus, Pluto, every 140 years. So we can pick up on what those cycles are later, but for now, just to know that, wow, that's a big, large contextual theme that we're looking at. And I've been asserting that the Venus-Mars conjunct the South Node represents a core reflection of this theme, which is a gender revolution, and the fact that the Sun at that time exactly when the Uranus-Pluto were conjunct, and I have it right down to the seconds, in fact, to the second, shows the Mercury and Sun in Libra, the sign of justice, equality, balance, fairness, etc. So that whole theme is core to this whole chart. The moon in the vision quest position means, we're searching for something. What are we looking for? And we're looking for healing, as I mentioned with Chiron and Saturn here, and I'm going to show you another indication of that later, but of this theme, and it's the gender revolution, first in terms of inequality, this historical theme of men dominating, etc. And it's been changing ever since, especially that was a turning point in this revolution. And now we see in the world, yes, it's made a lot of progress. So we see women in positions of leadership in all kinds of ways, and we see increasingly an equality between men and women socially and so forth. Now, by extension, this also represents Venus-Mars conjunction, the proverbial lovers, represents sort of a sexuality theme. And conjunct the South Node indicates there's something too much of something here. And so the issue is really probably linked to sexuality, especially regarding the inappropriate expression, like call it prostitution would be, clearly inappropriate. Some people argue it's good for society, but, invariably somebody is sort of losing out, or spiritually at least we are, and it shows that, by the way, karmically, but also pedophilia, pornography, child pornography, just the exploitation of women through sexuality, but also just generally the exploitation of sexuality also used against us in marketing schemes, employees, etc. So we're really dealing with, a wound in the human psyche regarding our sexuality, and that's a main focus I want to add to what I said before in the previous part one. Now, another thing that I didn't mention I want to is that the fact that Aquarius, the sign of revolution, is right on the midheaven, which is midheaven really is the main point of the whole chart. The sun is the main player, but the midheaven represents like what it's largely about in the world. So, it's in Aquarius, a revolution, and Uranus is the planet that rules Aquarius. So we get that a theme added to as well. Now, in this chart for Greenwich, which I mentioned earlier was an important place to look at from the standpoint of its 0 hour on the date on the clock. In this chart, we have Aries and Libra intercepted, and Aries rules Mars and Libra rules Venus. So interceptions represent a form of karma. Not every astrologer agrees, but I certainly do, and I've seen it many times. If you have interceptions, it means there's a kind of your soul's, your previous incarnation, let's say, was up to being selfish somehow. And if there's planets intercepted, it's worse. There was a form of selfishness or insensitivity or cruelty or some sort of almost crime against humanity, even. And so if you have planets intercepted, you may, some people think, oh no, that person's successful, so therefore, yeah, you look a little closer, you'll see that the story's there. I can assure you. So if you have an intercepted planet, look closely, you'll notice. And if you ask an astrologer and they explain what it might mean, you'll go, yeah, that's going on, I can assure you. So the main point is we have some karmic issues regarding gender equality, sexuality, and so forth in this seed chart. Now, what I want to also show you was I'm going to see it from somebody might say, well, that's Greenwich, that's a bit biased. I say, okay, let's take it from the Gold Coast, still October 965, 9:11 p.m. Gold Coast 0000. We're in the exact center of the world in terms of longitude and latitude. Let's call it that, okay? The zero, the omega, excuse me, the alpha point, the omega, the meeting point of the circle. In any case, in this chart, we have Taurus rising sign, and what's significant about that is Venus rules Taurus, then Venus is here in the seventh house where she's actually at home. That's her ruling house, but Scorpio there and Libra are and it kind of adds a level of difficulty and often linked to sexuality and often linked to sort of inappropriate levels of expression or obsessive compulsiveness, etc., in that regard. Also, Mars is not well placed in the seventh house, so there's a lot of complication with the south node, Mars in the seventh, Venus strong but with Scorpio there. Mars is strengthened by Scorpio, Venus is sort of so-called weakened. So altogether, it's complex, and it's sort of it's a battle of the sexes, in fact. So it's another theme is that we're dealing with a sort of a battle. We're not as fully loving each other and supporting each other and honoring each other as much as we could still in society. There's sort of still a lot of mystery, a lot of confusion, a lot of, issues of control and a battle of the sexes, as we've heard so many times. So that's just a quick other version of this whole story. Now, what I didn't do last time also, and I want to do, is show you the whole cycle. So that's the conjunction back in 65. Then I mentioned the first square, which occurred in June. I said October, but June 24th, 2012. And we're looking at a Greenwich chart. And what was significant about this chart, mostly it was the first square. That's what I just wanted to show you, the date where Uranus and Pluto came to their first turning point. Now, what's interesting is if you think back, now Isis has been brewing, but the first almost exact square occurred in 2011. I mentioned there was 7 exact and 2, one on either end, very close to exact. The first one was in 2011. If you think back, that's about when we started hearing about ISIS more. What is this group? Who are these crazy people? And I've mentioned last time, I'll mention again, I think the entire theme of male dominance is anchored in their stance. They're sort of almost instinctively moved to want to defend the old order and feel strongly about it, feel like that they're doing an honorable thing, as opposed to flowing with the evolution of change. They're, resisting it, which is not uncommon. It's a very strong theme in nature to have this sort of resistance to change. So I generally interpret it that way. And of course, the ISIS group does illustrate, strong male dominance and superiority over women, and sort of an imbalance. Of course, many people just say, well, yeah, aggressive, violent, and proud of it. But male dominant is the main point I want to make. Now, the other main thing of this chart was this Venus, the princess, Jupiter, the prince, conjunct the south node. Interesting. Now, so there's too much of something. What? Gemini, mind. Too much mind in all of this sexual and gender equality. The gender equality, again, lending to sexual issues at worst, control, be controlled, all of the stuff you can think of. So it's too much mind, not enough heart. Interestingly, the sun in Cancer is asking for empathy. Again, the sun in Cancer, and it's in the Dwa, it's the degree of Leo, which is the heart, the love and empathy aspect. More intimacy based on love is what the world needs, in the male-female relationship area. And, we all, it's not uncommon that people are struggling with this everywhere because it's a human issue. We're either caught in sort of addiction, or we're caught in excess, or we're caught in, battles of control. It goes on and on. So, but mainly here, too much mind. Jupiter in Gemini is not well placed, by the way. It's kind of one of its most challenging positions, called detriment. It means there's too much of a scattering of focus. So there's lots we can say about this whole chart, but I just wanted to make those few points uh, clear. Interestingly enough, the North Node's in Sagittarius, which rules Jupiter. So it's almost saying, come on, we need to do something about this, basically. Now, also for Greenwich, there is that interception. So it's again an issue. I use Greenwich again, I mentioned last time, but it's also, I want to add that England and the British Empire, how its role is in the world, is very important. So it kind of does hold a very pivotal position, especially here in North America, especially from the standpoint, Canada, the United States coming from Britain, etc. So we can look at it that way. I'm going to leave this chart here, and I'm going to look at the others. So that was the first square, which would equate to like the half moon or the spring equinox, where the conjunction is like a conjunction, or winter solstice. So now when we go to, that's the first square. Now we're going to look at the opposition. And I mentioned that the opposition would be in about 50 years. No, I was wrong. It's taken just about 47 years to arrive here, but because the planets move at different rates of speed, it's only going to take another 30 or so, 29, to get to 2046. So just about 30 years. A Saturn cycle, interestingly enough, which is 29.5 years in its fullness. Now, what's so interesting about this chart, in the exactness of to the second of Uranus at 3 Virgo 45, opposing Pluto at 3:45, the sun is exactly at 0 Libra. And not just 0 Libra, but exactly to the minute that the sun achieved its entry into Libra, which is symbolic of the exact moment of autumn equinox. So we come back there with there's a real synchronicity there in the theme. And Chiron, the wounded healer, is in Libra now. So it's really brought to the fore. And interestingly enough, Chiron's in opposition to Jupiter here. So we have another charged aspect of, needing there to be a reconciliation of some sort, an agreement and so forth. It could swing the opposite way, by the way, the notion of women having too much power and looking, at taking a dominant position, and men being sort of now in the subordinated position. That wouldn't work either. That would be a whole other set of problems. So imbalance is imbalance. That's all there is. If, yin and yang seek that harmony. So if a man's dominating a woman, it's out of balance. If a woman's dominating a man, it's out of balance. If a gender has more privilege than another, it's out of balance. If there are some who want revenge because things how they used to be, that's an issue of imbalance. So it goes on like that. So there's more to say about this chart, but I mostly want to illustrate that sun at exactly the equinox point. Chiron in there plays an important role. By the way, Chiron in Libra is a very difficult place. It's a real strong blind spot of some sort. So who knows how that's going to play out, but it will be a formative factor in this entire cycle. The fact that Mercury's in Libra adds to it, as was true in the root chart. So there's more to say about any chart. You can really go on and on, but we're going to leave it there for now. Well, the sun, it is worth mentioning, in addition to being exactly at that, equinox 0 Libra point, is the planet of lowest degree. And okay, let's look up. It's in fact the moon, interestingly enough, which is playing the role of highest degree. So that's significant on its own, but we won't go into it too much. what I'm going to do now is look to the next chart, and I'm going to look at that was the opposition. Oh, what I didn't mention about the opposition is that's when the theme comes to its fullness. That's where it really peaks in terms of the root conjunction. The opposition represents the high point. This is the big time. This is the full moon. This is the peak of the mountain. And so whatever is still occurring in terms of this revolution will come to a front and a peak point. And an opposition really isn't altogether peaceful. It's really a dynamic balance, which at best is, harmonized, but it's tensional. There's a tug of war, so to speak. So we can expect things to definitely be percolating over this period of time, this next approximate 30 years from now, from this between now and then, during which time we come to that fullness. That's a long time. So the main point there is whatever else might be happening in the world with ISIS and whatever, we're still going to see this dance, this gender equality theme, and who knows exactly how it's going to play out, but that's the pitch. I believe that is a core theme within it. Now, we're going to look further, and we're looking at the upper square. Now, this would be symbolic of autumn equinox, or the waning half moon. So it's the last quarter. So that occurs on 2773. Now, what was significant about this chart in particular? Well, mostly it was the date I was looking at that caught my attention. But here's the Pluto at 517 and Uranus at 517. So you get the exact opposition. Ah, yes, I know what it was. It just so happens that Jupiter at that time will be opposing Uranus, and there's be various points in the year where it would be exact, and they're both squaring Pluto, just what we're experiencing right now. So that's not an uncommon theme entirely, but it just so happens that it's the other side almost of what we're experiencing now, and Pluto would be, in the apex point, which I mentioned, which is now Pluto's the sign of transformation, but also what's called regeneration. Interestingly enough, it's in the sign of Aries. So currently it's in the sign of governments, which, and structures and societal, structures. But there it's in Aries, which is the self, the individual. And so it would be a revolution of individual regeneration. And interestingly enough, at that time, Chiron's also in Aries. So it represents that the individual within society will be, being by synchronicity and by the flow of destiny, pushed to enter into the next level of its own regenerative cycle, meaning probably that, people will be that much more focused on working on themselves. They'll be that much more interested in their evolution. They'll be, perhaps less focused on material gain and so forth, like we see now. A very proud march of what could be called ambition at best, but greed at worst. We celebrate it, and people are very proud of their achievements and they have great power, and they can exploit information technologies and so forth. And it really is rather impressive on its own ground. But it remains that there's a lot of poverty in the world and a lot of issues. So call it as you wish. What is also important about this chart too is we again have planets conjunct the South Node. It seems to be a repeating theme in this entire cycle. And the Sun and Mercury almost equally distant from that South Node in Pisces. And Mercury retrograde in Pisces is complicated. So it would probably suggest that okay, enough of this revolution, almost like with the Sun and Mars there, but okay, enough. It's causing almost like confusion at worst to people. People maybe won't know quite where they stand. It's hard to really know. Of course, we're looking way down the road. 2730 is like whatever, because we can't really say much even about the next number of years. But on the basis that we're going to get through our challenges collectively on this planet, we can begin to surmise what this theme is. But that's another way of looking at the entire cycle of 40 years. Oh my God, what a long period of time, especially in this modern era with everything moving so quickly. But on a final note, I'll leave you with the conjunction of Uranus and Pluto next. Now, it's not so much to go into what is it all about, but I will mention it briefly, as much as it's just to show on April 24th, 2104 is when we have the next Uranus-Pluto cycle, and it's in Taurus there, and you can begin to analyze this chart and begin to wonder, okay, is there a main theme it represents? I would even go as far as to say, especially because it's in Taurus with the Sun there, and see that Venus in Aries and the Moon. This is a theme. This is a very important theme right there. The fact that the Moon, Venus at 29, 29's a critical degree. It's the last degree in the 30 degrees of a sign, so we call it a critical degree, a degree of overcoming. It's not bad, it's not evil, but it is an issue one has to overcome. If you have that in your natal chart, any planets at 29 or important angles, well, you have some things to overcome. And again, it doesn't make you a bad person by any means, not at all, but does mean you're probably aware of it. But if you're not, you could be more aware and you become more conscious of those things. So the main point is Venus rules Taurus. So in Aries becomes the dispositor conjunct the moon. Well, you can begin to see it's almost like the individual in society has become too emphasized, or is too much. It's almost like an issue of too much emphasis on who I am as an individual, too much emphasis on um, you know maybe people will be so confused with this gender equality revolution that things won't be quite so easy. We already see that in a world of so many single people. It's hard for people seem to meet others and to feel that they can enter into relationships. So it makes you wonder, is that going to increase? And so forth. So there's a lot of questions. We're not going to try and answer those. The main point is just to bring attention, A, to the date of when the new cycle begins, but also we get a glimpse at it. Taurus is about building. So if you have a Sun, Uranus, Pluto conjunction, wow, it's almost like the building of a new world, the building of a whole new society, which looking forward, 21/4, well, that makes sense. Geez, with the technology we have at our disposal, if we haven't had major war by then, well, I think most people would be surprised. Well, let's hope we don't at the level, but it does suggest on its own ground a revolution of a building. It's almost like the building of a new level of consciousness, overcoming overemphasis of the individual. And that's indicated also by Mercury. So it's not just these two in Aries at the 29th degree, but Mercury too. So you begin to get this theme. And it is sort of worth noting that Mars here in Leo is square Venus. Actually, yeah, I'd almost put that as, it's kind of got some difficult aspects, especially to Venus and the Moon. So it's almost like the world has progressed and people, things have fallen out of proportion in terms of glamour, in terms of, hero status or the privileges that come from it, whether you're, let's say, a performer or an actress or actor or like a player in some sport, etc. You have this kind of demigod status, and it's kind of at issue, especially because often, unfortunately, what happens on the streets is one thing, what happens behind closed doors is another. It almost suggests that. So it suggests that there'll again be a theme of, interestingly enough, on the house cusp of Taurus in this chart and on the ascendant. It's worth noting on that exact moment, exactly at right to the second, Libra rising sign. So we have this repeat of right at 0 degrees too. That's the equinox point, autumn equinox, and when the sun enters Libra. And on the house cusp of Taurus, we have Libra also. So wow, what tremendous emphasis of themes of Libra and relationship linked to this conjunction. And so there you go. There's some insights for you. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.